Okay, hello, this is Barnaby from Waterford 1am, and I'm here with Jim Cunningham, the MP for Coventry South. Thanks very much for joining me, Mr. Cunningham.
All right.
Just a few questions to start off with. So, you represent University seat,
Right.
at least partly, in the area of Earlston. Is there any different demands that representing a seat, maybe with a more kind of settled population?
Not really. I mean, this constituency is a complicated constituency when you actually analyse it, because it goes from being very affluent to quite a lot of poverty. So it's just part of the mix, to use an expression. In fact, you could argue that the two universities in the constituency are an asset in the sense that if you take the University of Warwick, well, it's an international university now, so anybody thinking about investing in Coventry would be impressed with the fact we've got two very, very good universities, and that's always an attraction, because I can remember years ago when people were talking about investing in Coventry, they very often asked, what was your education system like, what's your transport system like, have you got executive housing? So they are assets in actual fact.
Okay. Do you have any issues with representing kind of temporary population? So obviously the students who are here during term time and then not during kind of holiday time. Is there any difference in how you represent them?
Well, not really. I mean, every student is an individual and they've got their own views on things, but the problems that students encounter are the same over the years. There's nothing different about them fundamentally. It's only different people that are putting them forward. So from that perspective, I don't see any big difference really.
Do you see many students in this office? Do you get many of them coming to surgery, things like that?
No, but I've seen some students last night, in actual fact about 8 or 9 of them. They came to an event I was at from the University of Warwick. So from time to time we do have contact with students. Occasionally I go up to the university, especially if you get a leading politician, say from the Labour Party up there, we would come up there and obviously students come along to, maybe out of curiosity, maybe out of interest, to see who that personality is and what their views are, so you would encounter them then. So plus the fact from time to time we get correspondence from students, particularly overseas students, about visa problems and that sort of stuff. So one way or another we're in contact, let's put it that way. In fact, I actually had a debate on student loans in House of Commons in Westminster Hall a couple of days ago, highlighting the fact that the government is going to sell off student loans. Is this, putting another burden on students for want of a better term? So yeah, we are involved one way or another.
Is there any kind of relationship between MPs who represent kind of university seats? You know, people like Daniel Zeichner in Cambridge, for example. Is there any kind of crossover where you talk about the problems you face dealing with kind of?
Well, there is a cross-party group, APG as we would call it, on universities in general terms and students. In fact, I think there's a meeting this week about in relation to student problems at the House of Commons. It's an APG, so yeah. We're very much in contact with each other.
Okay. Moving on now to slightly different issues. Obviously, you're from Scotland, but you represent an English seat, but you do sit on the Scottish Affairs Committee.
When I get there, yeah.
Okay. How do you feel about sort of the attempts over the last few years to kind of limit Scottish influence over the whole sort of English votes for English laws thing, the attempts to have vetoes over legislation affecting certain areas? What's your view been on those kind of?
Well, actually, I had apprehension about it at the beginning, but it seems to work okay. I've not seen any major problems with it so far, and quite frankly, it doesn't happen very often. So from that perspective, there was a bit of apprehension about it. And in fact, you could have said it could have caused confusion at times. Fingers crossed, it's been working reasonably well. I can't think of an incident that, created any difficulties.
Okay, and talking about the SNP again, obviously they're currently making noises about going back towards another referendum on Scottish independence. What do you make of Nicola Sturgeon's claim that the situation's changed with the vote to leave the European Union?
Well, I don't think so in that sense, because in actual fact, the referendum, and it was always clear that it would cover the whole of Great Britain. So, and they are part of the Union. So from that perspective, she obviously will, from a negotiating point of view, make noises about referendums to the Prime Minister. And of course, what I suspect it's really all about is putting pressure on the Prime Minister to get a good deal for Scotland.
Do you think that's going to have any effect? Do you think that in many ways kind of people who did support Remain are now sort of relying upon the pressure from the SNP and other regional parties who did support Remaining to try and kind of push Theresa May towards
Well, I think Theresa May knows there's pressure from the Labour Party. I mean, we've got issues, for example, EU nationals live in this country. We've also got the British nationals who are married on to EU nationals. They're concerned about what the situation's going to be after Brexit. And I think that this week that's an issue that's coming back to the Commons from the Lords. So there is a lot of issues surrounding Brexit. It's not straightforward. People tend to forget Brexit really was the start of a process. That's the first thing. And secondly, the reason why it ended up in the Supreme Court was dead simple. David Cameron, when he called that referendum, said it was an advisory referendum. Had it been a binding referendum, it would never have been in the courts in the first place. But more fundamental to that is, at the end of the day, the Brexit people campaigned on one of the platforms was that the British Parliament should be supreme. So now we get to a situation where the British Parliament was supposed to be going to be supreme, and they were trying to deny us our rights to scrutinise legislation. And it's very important that Parliament retains that rights, and individual MPs retain that rights, because I've had cases, if you check the record, where injustices have been committed to people like whistleblowers at, say, the University Hospital in Coventry, where a doctor, or a consultant rather, was suspended. Now, if we hadn't had the right to raise it in Parliament, then that individual's case would never have been heard. And I had raised it and ended up in the courts and that. So, whilst a lot of people will say, well, Parliament's this and Parliament's that, but at the end of the day, they don't realise that if an injustice is committed, we've got the right to highlight that and take the cudgels up on it.
So, obviously now the Article 50 vote's gone through, so you envisage quite a big role for Parliament in the negotiations over the next 2 years, particularly for the Labour Party.
Well, the Parliament will not carry out the negotiations, but what Parliament will do from time to time, monitor the progress. They want explanations from the government, or ministers who's handling the negotiations. And at the end of the day, Parliament will scrutinise it. Now, Theresa May can say that she's got a mandate to implement a Brexit. Well, that's possibly true in a way. But equally, that doesn't stop Parliament scrutinising it.
Okay. And final question I've got, hasn't come up yet, but he was always going to have to. Jeremy Corbyn, his decision to whip MPs on the Article 50 vote. Do you think that was correct, or do you think there's also a point that MPs have a right to represent their constituents if they live in Remain constituencies, or also their own consciences if they've got very strong views on the European Union?
Well, I think Jeremy Corbyn was right, actually, because at the end of the day, this was a national referendum and involving all of the UK. We all have got to accept the will of the British people. Very often we are accused as politicians of ignoring it. So from that perspective, but that would not stop an MP who represented a constituency voting for it to go up and represent the views of their constituents. But at the end of the day, you've got to respect the result. So there isn't a contradiction in that. So I think Jeremy Corbyn was actually doing what the British people wanted him to do.